is my third YouTube video I've ever made, and I decided, because the number 3 is extremely important to me, it's like my special number, that I really should do something as good as reasonable that represents my overall channel well. I also decided I really need to do some digital art specifically and some time lapses with some voiceover. So what I did here is 3 separate paintings, which I did in Procreate, and the first 2 are done as paintings for Mermaid that just passed. This first one here is of a mer king that I made up. I haven't yet named the place he comes from, but I do know that he rules in a tropical region of a world I haven't yet filled in a city-state region that he controls with really powerful magic, and he's actually a pretty nice guy. And he's much more of a magic user than a warrior, but he's still fully capable as a warrior. And as he has a lengthened lifespan, I believe he's had more time to train. I think what I want to have it be is that that's something that the royal family is born with. Whoever inherits the throne as king or queen has a longer lifespan. So I named him King Oriolon Rendis, and I think Rendis is going to have to do with the city, but it might just be the name of the royal family and the city has a different name. He's meant to definitely be on the very sexy and idealized side of things, and as he's no human, I figure it's fine to make his waist narrow, but I think maybe I made it too narrow. It's a bit off on one side versus the other. So in the end, I think it's fine because he really isn't a human. Possibly next time I'll do a bit more research and only go with the thinnest that a real human man can get, because this is a somewhat human-like merfolk. I also very much prefer the term merfolk over mermaid because they're not always female, and there are the separate terms mermaid and merman, which I still use, but overall the race or the species is merfolk, so the people of the sea. For me, any merfolk should be part fish, but I prefer the orientation of the tail to go up and down like a cetacean because that works better with the human spine and the human hips and the way that the human form works. So even here, his tail's actually sort of meant to go up and down. It's just the position he's sitting in that makes it unclear. Now, the other thing is I sometimes draw tails with the other orientation on merfolk, but I always make them longer, so it makes sense that perhaps the skeletal structure could switch directions at that point. And in rare cases, I do the knee bend version, but usually just to fit a picture in a page because I don't want to redraw the whole body. Sometimes I'll draw things extremely cartoony and exaggerated. I think variety is a good way to go. For me, I like to use separate terms for underwater sea people that aren't part fish but part other things, except when I do a merfolk that's more of a mix with a mammal like a cetacean, I tend to still use the term merfolk. Technically, merfolk should probably work for any underwater race that you're deciding to do. I just think that maybe we should use separate terms for some of the other ones. Such as the seal key, which is another mer creature that's also a person, which can turn back and forth between a seal form and a more human form. So this picture here is the second picture in the video, and it is also the last painting I did for the mermaid that just passed. I used an art pose app I have in order to pose 2 humanoid figures in space so that they're more foreshortened and coming towards the viewer. I also decided to have them sort of reaching out towards each other and to place it in such a way that the geometric forms the fins and bodies made would be interesting in space and the silhouettes would be fairly strong. Originally, I intended the male to be more facing forward in space the way the female is, but I tried to adjust it a little bit, but I actually liked the way it looked and the way the body was shaped in space. So after a while I decided it's okay that he's not coming as far forward in space because she is, and there's still depth cues, and the way the shapes are between their bodies and the spacing and the silhouette still looks really good. So I decided to keep him not going quite as foreshortened in space as I originally intended. So I did a species of merfolk that I made up for a project I'm doing, which is also a world called Project Imagiscria, and you'll definitely hear more about that once I have some more subscribers on YouTube and probably a few more followers on Instagram, because it's intended to be a project that I'm going to involve my followers in making decisions for after I have a certain amount made for myself. But I think that's all I'll say about it. And of course I'm going to talk about this type of merfolk because I have some specifics. So what they are is a race of merfolk called the Rivdalim. They adapt to both fresh or salt water, and 40% of them can transform their tails into web-footed legs that have fins on the calves. They can travel around and colonize new areas and build new towns and villages, and they're very good at using a variety of magics with individuals varying in strength. They love baked goods in particular and have been known to trade for them. They'll also build their own bakeries outside of the water for their own people, and many of their villages have some facilities outside of the water while the main town is underwater, as only some of their population can actually come out on the land, not all of them. The men and women shown here are two individuals that I haven't named yet, but I figured out some things about them. She's more bold and outgoing, and he's much more shy, so she encourages him to explore an adventure, and he encourages her to be slightly more cautious than she would be. They start off as friends and eventually become a couple, and farther into the future of that, get married. So anyone who wants to comment a suggestion for their names is free to do so below. Eventually I'm going to choose their names, and it may or may not be with the decisions of the people's comments, and it depends on if I even get any comments. And when I do name them, I'll be sure to pin the comment on this video with their decided names. The other thing to know about them is that I decided it would be fun if I made the female have more classically masculine colors for her fins and the male have more classically feminine colors for his fins, because I thought that would be a really interesting juxtaposition. The other thing I decided for them is that I wanted him to be the one of the two of them wearing a metallic piece of jewelry, and I think that was just because I wanted one of them to have a piece of jewelry on their tail, and I think it looked better on him, so I just put it there. The other thing to know is that these particular merfolk also have no hair. They don't actually have eyelashes, but eyelash-like markings near the eyes. All the markings on their body are colored skin. So these varieties of merfolk actually only have fins, and they don't have any hair at all. So she has fins on her head, fin-like ears, fins on the arms. They have webbed fingers, and they're quite slick and fast in the water. And I will talk more about this type of merfolk eventually during Project Imagiscria, so you can look forward to that. So this third picture coming up is my absolute favorite and most important character of all time. She is a felinus, or cat person, in her base form, but is actually a shapeshifter that can transform into everything. She's a super powerful immortal being of great power, known as Volasa, herself the Queen of Vatar. She does have a tail in her base form, but it's actually hidden behind her body here. I thought with such a long skirt and her hair and the pose, it wouldn't make sense to show her tail, so I kept it out. The ethereal wings in here are just representative. Of course, she can summon ethereal wings. She's really extremely overpowered, but I feel absolutely no guilt about that, even though she's 100% a self-insert alter ego character. It's extremely fun to have a story where I'm an incredibly powerful immortal being, and as her base form is a white-furred Angora felinus with hair down to the ankles and sapphire blue eyes. It's something that I find really personal and special, and I really won't accept any criticism about Volasa, so you might as well save your time. Whether it's constructive or elsewise, I will just utterly ignore automatically any criticism about Volasa, which I think is fine, because this is the one character that's completely mine and has nothing to do with what anyone else thinks. Of course, I have other characters I really like that I don't really want criticism about either, but Volasa is the most important one. However, she represents me so much, I didn't want to do my channel and my online marketing without including Volasa, so I definitely had to show her off. I'm not 100% happy with this painting, though I do like the wings. I think I might have preferred more falcon-like ones. The problem is they wouldn't have fit as well or looked as large compared to her body, so I ended up going with some wider, shorter wings here. I still like them, but they're not as anatomically accurate to birds, but that doesn't matter when they're magical spiritual wings and not physical flesh and blood at all, and they represent magic and freedom and transformation, so I think it's okay that they're like this, even though it's symbolic. Especially because it's symbolic, rather. So, for Volasa, she rules a world called Vatar, and that's also technically her last name. And Vatar is my main world and the first world I ever made up, and I'm still adding stuff to it all the time. I actually have full world maps and stuff done for that. And the language I made up, called Felilatean, is also from this world. So I will be doing additional content from this in the future, and it's what I've named myself and my entire channel after. So it's kind of important to me. The other thing is that I will be redrawing Velosa at least once a year going forward for my YouTube channel, so we can see all the different versions and improvements as time goes on, and that will be fun, I think, as well. So, as always, you should remember that questions, comments, and constructive criticism are welcome here, unless it's about Velosa, then I'm not interested unless it's a compliment. That's actually the honest truth, so I think I better just put that out there so people know. And the other thing to say is that I'm happy with this end card. I just made it. However, I will be replacing it with an even better one in the future. And I will be replacing the opening with a better version and keep upgrading more videos in the future.